In this video, we are going to give a summary of all things that we've studied about friction so far, and we also are going to wrap up friction in this very video. So let us start with the disadvantages of friction. Basically, there are three disadvantages of friction, as you can see. The first one is friction opposes motion. So this is my famous eraser here. I want it to go forward. So what I do is I push this eraser. So every time I push it, what is happening, as you can see, is the eraser is stopping. I push it from this side also, you see the eraser eventually stops. Why is the eraser stopping? The eraser is stopping because friction is making it stop. So therefore, friction is opposing the motion of this eraser. I want the eraser to move forward, but friction is time and again, every time, stopping it. So remember, friction opposes motion. The second point, it causes wear and tear. Again, you can give a look at this eraser here. The eraser is broken and it looks old and weary. Now this eraser has been used so many times. I have rubbed this eraser so many times on paper. So every time I rub, what happens? Friction is generated. So that friction causes wear and tear of this eraser. See, it's broken, so to say, it's torn. Therefore, it is friction which has caused the eraser to look like this. So to say, the present condition of the eraser is because of friction. Now, the further I use it more, it's going to get smaller and smaller. It is not just with this eraser, it's with everything, anything that gets rubbed, including your clothes, the duster, anything. Machinery parts. So remember, friction causes wear and tear. The third disadvantage is friction produces heat. Now we've already seen that when we rub the palm of our hands, what happens is heat is generated. We start feeling warm. So remember, friction produces heat. Now the heat that friction produces is not always advantageous. The heat that is produced in machinery parts, in machines, inside the machines of a car or inside big machines, what happens is because of friction, the machinery parts get heated, and because of that, the machinery parts might stop functioning. So remember, friction producing heat is a disadvantage in many cases. Now let us look at the methods of reducing friction. Friction can be reduced by making the surface smooth. We've already seen that rougher the surface, more will be the friction, and smoother the surface, lesser will be the friction. This is your class 6 physics book, the cover of which is very glossy, shiny, and very smooth. Therefore, if I take a small glass bead over here, see how easily it starts rolling and how easily it moves without me even pushing it. See. Whereas when the same glass ball or bead is allowed to move on this cloth here, let's see, it doesn't move. Or it doesn't move that smoothly as in the case of your smooth physics book cover. Why? Because the cloth is a rougher surface than a smooth physics book cover page. So therefore remember, friction can be reduced by making the surface smooth. Another way of reducing friction is by using lubricants like grease, oil, etc. Now what is a lubricant? Lubricant is a very slippery kind of a substance. It could be a liquid like oil or it could be a paste like grease. So an oil is a lubricant. You can see that oil is being used in between two machine parts that rotates. So oil works as a lubricant, and this is a grease. Now grease also is a lubricant. It could be of different colors, of course. It's more like a paste and it's a slippery substance, of course. Now this is to be applied on the surfaces of machine parts. You can see how grease is applied on different surfaces of machine parts here, here. Okay, so you can see grease being used, which makes the movement of the different machine parts smooth. A grease could be like this. This is a grease of a different color, of course, and you can see grease being applied here. Friction can also be reduced by the use of ball bearings. Now what are ball bearings? Ball bearings are small steel balls that you can see here. So these ball bearings, they roll and help in the reduction of friction, because of which the outer steel disc can rotate very smoothly and easily. You can see small ball bearings inside this fidget spinner also, because of which friction reduces and thereby the fidget spinner spins very smoothly. The way to reduce friction is by streamlining our body. Now, what does streamlining mean? Streamlining means to give a shape with pointed ends to a body, like this shape over here. So this body marked A over here, it'll be easier for this body to move through water or to move through air than this circular body. The circular body also obviously can move through air or water, but this body with pointed ends, or this streamlined body, so to say, will be very easy for it to move through water or to move through air. Why? Because the pointed ends cuts through the water or through air. So it is easier for streamlined bodies to move through water or through air. That is why our ships, you can see it has pointed ends. You can see over here also it has pointed end so that it can move easily through water. A boat also here also it has pointed ends, you can see. So all these bodies are streamlined. Not just that, nature has also given streamlined shapes to birds and fishes so that they can easily cut through the air or to cut through water. Here you can see the pointed end, pointed beak of the bird. Also that of a fish. Here it has a pointed end, you can see. So we have animals with streamlined bodies existing in nature also. Let us also therefore give a look at the methods of increasing friction. Friction can be increased by making the surface rough. We already know rougher the surface, more is the friction. So therefore, if you want to increase friction, you need to make the surface rough. Another thing is, friction can be increased by using dry surfaces. You must have seen during rainy season, when the road is wet, what happens is many bikers, they slip and fall on the road. Whereas during other seasons, when the road is dry, the same bikers or on the same road, the bikes do not fall. Now, why is that so? Wet surfaces, they offer lesser friction than dry surfaces. During rainy season, the roads are wet, so therefore they offer less friction. Therefore, bikers, they tend to slip and fall more often on the wet road than when the road is dry. Now we also know more the weight of the body, more is the friction. Therefore, friction can be increased by increasing the weight of the body. Now let us also look into the advantages of friction. Now friction is a force we need in our daily life. In fact, it's like it would be very, very difficult for us to live our everyday life without friction. Why? Because it is friction because of which we can walk or run. Forget about walk and run. The very fact that we can stand is only because of friction. It is only because of friction that we can walk, run, or simply stand for that matter. To give you an example of that, if it's a very slippery road and you're walking on that slippery road, what happens to you? Will you be able to walk on that slippery road? You won't be able to walk. Forget about you running on that slippery road. In fact, if the road is very slippery, you won't be able to even stand on that slippery road. Why? Because slippery roads, they have less friction. So remember, we should be happy that there is something called friction in our life. Another thing, the very fact that we can write is because of friction. A teacher can write on the board with a piece of chalk is only possible because of friction. We can write on the paper using a pen only because of friction. If there is no friction, we would not be able to write these letters clearly because our pen would simply slip if there was no friction. Another thing, vehicles can run on the road because of friction. Again, if the roads offered no friction, then vehicles would not be able to move or run on the road because vehicles would simply slip in the absence of friction. Now, friction not just help us to walk or run, or it not just helps a vehicle to run, it also helps a vehicle to stop. If there was no friction, we would not be able to stop a car at a desired location. If there was no friction, when we try to stop a car, the car would simply slip and thereby not stop at that particular place. So therefore, friction is also advantageous to us because it helps to stop a speeding vehicle, or it simply helps us to stop when we are running. The very fact that we can sit on a chair or a stool is possible because of friction. If there was no friction, we would simply slip when we try to sit on the chair. We can light a matchstick because of friction. If there was no friction, we would not be able to light a matchstick. So these are some of the basic things that we need in our everyday life, which of course is possible only because of friction. Friction has many disadvantages, but at the same time, friction has many advantages as well. Therefore, friction is also called a necessary evil. It is necessary in our everyday life because it has so many advantages, but it is an evil because it has many disadvantages also. Thereby, friction is also called a necessary evil.